This happened during a weekend trip to Asheville, North Carolina. My girlfriend and I had booked a small Airbnb cabin about 20 minutes outside town. It looked perfect in the photos: wooden porch, string lights, trees all around, and a hot tub we were honestly more excited about than anything else. The listing said we had the entire place to ourselves. That was important to us. We got there around 6 p.m. on a Friday. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures, maybe a little older in person, but nothing alarming. The host had messaged us the door code earlier that day, and check-in was easy. About an hour after we arrived, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw a man in his late 50s standing on the porch. He smiled and said, "Hey, I'm the owner. Just wanted to make sure you got in okay." That was a little unexpected, but not that weird. I said yes, everything was fine. Then he looked past me into the cabin and said, "Mind if I come in real quick and check the thermostat?" I didn't love that, but he was the host, and I didn't want to be rude. So I let him in. He walked around slowly, too slowly. He checked the thermostat, then the kitchen sink, then the back door, then the windows. My girlfriend came out of the bedroom and gave me a look like, "Why is he still here?" After about 10 minutes, I said, "I think we're all good. Thanks for stopping by." He laughed and said, "No problem. I live close, so I keep an eye on the place." That sentence bothered me. He finally left. We tried to relax after that, but the mood had changed. Around 10 p.m. we were watching TV when we heard footsteps on the porch. Not an animal. Footsteps. I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped outside the living room window. The blinds were closed, but there was a tiny gap near the bottom. I could see movement outside. My girlfriend whispered, "Is that him?" I didn't answer. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from the host. "Everything okay in there?" I stared at the message. I had not contacted him. We had not made noise. There was no reason for him to ask that. I replied, "Yes. We're fine." He wrote back, "Saw the lights on. Just checking." That meant he was outside. I got up and locked the deadbolt, even though it was already locked. Then I checked every window. Around midnight, we heard the hot tub cover move. It was on the back deck. I grabbed my phone and walked toward the kitchen window. The back deck light was on, and I could see the host standing beside the hot tub. He was just looking at it. Not cleaning it. Not fixing it. Just standing there in the dark, staring at the cabin. I opened the back door and said, "Can I help you?" He didn't look embarrassed at all. He said, "Just making sure you didn't leave the cover open." I said, "We haven't even used it." He smiled and said, "I know." That was the moment I decided we were leaving. I closed the door, locked it, and told my girlfriend to pack. While we were throwing our clothes into bags, the host messaged again. "You don't need to leave." Neither of us had told him we were leaving. We didn't answer. We got in the car and drove to a hotel in Asheville. I reported him to the platform the next morning. A week later, I got a message from another guest who had stayed there before us. They found my review and said the same thing had happened to them. The host came by, asked to enter, then kept appearing outside at night. The listing disappeared a few days later. I still book Airbnb sometimes, but I never book remote cabins anymore unless the reviews specifically say the host gives guests privacy. Because "I live close" can sound helpful. Or it can sound like a warning. I booked the Airbnb because it was cheaper than a hotel. I was in Chicago for a work conference, and everything downtown was overpriced. The place I found was a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, about 20 minutes from the venue. The reviews were good, the host had a verified profile, and check-in was through a keypad lock. I arrived late on a Tuesday night. The apartment was clean, but it felt lived in. Not dirty, just personal. There were books on the shelf, half-used condiments in the fridge, and a coat hanging behind the bedroom door. I assumed it was one of those places where the owner stayed there sometimes and rented it out when they were gone. The first night was fine. The second night was not. I got back from the conference around 11:30 p.m. I took a shower, changed into sweatpants, and got into bed. I was half asleep when I heard the keypad beep. At first, I thought I dreamed it. Then I heard it again. Beep. 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 Someone was entering a code. I sat up in bed. The lock clicked. The front door opened. I froze. A man's voice said, "Hello." I didn't move. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I grabbed my phone and texted the host, * someone just entered the apartment. Is this you? No answer. The man walked into the kitchen. I could hear cabinets opening. Then he said, "Hello. Anyone here?" He didn't sound scared. He sounded annoyed. I locked the bedroom door as quietly as I could. It had one of those weak push-button locks, the kind you could probably open with a fingernail. Then he knocked on the bedroom door. I stopped breathing. He said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm renting this Airbnb." "Who are you?" There was a pause. Then he said, "I live here." My stomach dropped. I called the host through the app. Still no answer. The man outside the door started talking faster. He said he had rented the place 2 weeks earlier. He said his booking ended that morning, but the code still worked. He said he had left some things in the closet and came back to get them. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. But he had entered the apartment at midnight without warning, and I was alone. I told him I was calling the police. He got angry immediately. He said, "Don't do that. I just need my stuff." I said, "Then wait outside." He said, "I'm not waiting outside my own place." That was when he tried the bedroom handle. The tiny lock held for maybe 1 second. Then it popped open. I screamed. He stepped back and raised his hands, like I was the one overreacting. I ran past him, grabbed my backpack from the chair, and got out of the apartment barefoot. I didn't even take my suitcase. I went downstairs and called 911 from the sidewalk. The police came, and the man was still inside when they arrived. He really had stayed there before me. He really did have the old code. But the officers told him that didn't give him the right to walk in after his reservation ended. The host finally replied almost an hour later. All they said was, "Sorry, I forgot to reset the code." That was it. I got a refund, but I didn't sleep that night. Since then, whenever I check into a short-term rental, I ask if the door code was changed before my stay. And if the host doesn't answer clearly, I don't stay. This happened in a beach town in Florida. A group of 4 of us rented a house for a long weekend. It wasn't fancy, but it was close to the beach, and that was all we cared about. The listing said 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, full house, self-check-in. When we arrived, everything seemed normal except for one door at the end of the hallway. It had a keypad lock on it. I messaged the host and asked about it. They replied quickly, *owner's closet. Please do not open. That made sense. A lot of rentals have locked closets with cleaning supplies or personal stuff. So we ignored it. The first night, we went out for dinner, came back late, and all crashed pretty quickly. Around 3 a.m. I woke up needing water. The house was quiet. I walked into the kitchen, got a glass, and as I was heading back to the bedroom, I heard something from the hallway. A soft click. I stopped. The sound came from the locked owner's closet. Then I heard a floorboard creak. Inside the closet. I stood there in the dark, holding a glass of water, trying to convince myself it was the house settling. Then the keypad lit up from the inside. I didn't even know keypads could do that. A second later, the locked door opened about an inch. I dropped the glass. The door immediately closed again. One of my friends woke up from the noise and came into the hallway. I told him what happened, and he laughed at first, but then we both heard it. Breathing. From behind the locked door. We woke everyone up and called the host. No answer. We called again. No answer. Then we heard a phone vibrating behind the locked door. That was when none of us were laughing. We grabbed our bags and left the house. We sat in the car at the end of the driveway and called the police. When officers arrived, they knocked on the locked door and announced themselves. No one answered. They contacted the host, who suddenly picked up when the police called. The host told them it was just a storage room and gave them the code. Inside was not a closet. It was a small room. There was a mattress on the floor, a fan, bottled water, snack wrappers, and a laptop. There was also a narrow exterior door behind a curtain that led to the side yard. Someone had been staying in that room while guests rented the house. The host claimed it was a maintenance worker who sometimes used the space and wasn't supposed to be there during bookings. But the police found fresh food, clothes, and a phone charger. Whoever had been inside was gone by the time they opened the room. The exterior door had been left unlocked. We got a full refund, but none of us cared about the money. We drove 3 hours home that same morning. The part that bothers me most is how normal the listing looked. Good reviews. Nice photos. Quick replies. Nothing about it seemed dangerous. Now whenever I book a rental, I check every door when I arrive. And if there is a locked room inside the house, I leave. Because I don't care what they call it. An owner's closet should not breathe.